Welcome to the Water Play Podcast. I'm Jacob P. But Lucas won't be joining us for this episode. He'll be back next week. So to begin, we understand we've kind of missed a couple weeks, but we're gonna get more to a regular schedule in the next coming weeks. So just be patient. We're getting new to this. We're really new, so give us a chance. But let's first begin with some of the news that happened last week. So the Packers had suspended Jaire Alexander for one game, the game against the Minnesota Vikings. They didn't need him. They crushed Minnesota. What ended up happening was Jaire Alexander, who's from Carolina, is from North Carolina. When the Packers played the Panthers during the coin toss, some teams move with or have the players go up for the coin toss, and they're from the area. Jaire is from the area, but wasn't selected captain. Yet he walked out there anyway and called the coin flip, which it is illegal, I guess, in some sense of the word, but not NFL illegal. So the Packers decided independently that Jaire Alexander would be suspended again, the game against Minnesota. Again, they crushed Minnesota. They didn't need him, but still a veteran that you say, no, we're not doing this. It boggles my mind that the Packers went with that and said, well, we talked to him too. What were you gonna do? It already happened. It already happened. There's not much you could have done. Sorry. It didn't affect the game in any way. What could you have done by any sense of the word? So it was convoluted, to say the least. Next up, the Broncos benched Russell Wilson for the remainder of the season, starting Jarrett Stidham. Stidham was in a similar situation last year with the Raiders when he signed their last offseason. Derek Carr had injury guarantees. If he got injured, he would get a certain amount of money. I believe it was like $38 million. So instead of getting Derek Carr hurt, the Raiders benched him, put Jarrett Stidham in. Same situation. Russell Wilson, $37 million guaranteed if he gets injured. Put Jarrett Stidham in. Actually, same week. Which is crazy. It makes no sense. Russell Wilson, who is a very cliche kind of guy. You see all these coaches, they're very cliche. You see these players, they're very cliche. Russell Wilson is the most cliche. And he went and said, yeah, we had these conversations, me and ownership, and I was told that if I did not take a pay cut, that at the end of the year, whether we were in it or not, I would get benched. Which, again, makes no sense. Because they still technically had a chance to win and get into the playoffs this prior week. They had to have a lot go their way. They needed to beat the Chargers, which they did. And then they needed the Chiefs to lose to the Bengals, which they did not. But just that, and yet we're still saying that this doesn't make any sense. Now, a lot of people say, well, Sean Payton is acting like he's a thug. He's acting like this. He's acting like that. I'm not going with that. I'm not going there. I don't sugarcoat things. I'm telling you what happened. What I think happened was, and from what Russell Wilson has said, I don't know how these conversations went down, but Sean Payton has a vision of what he wants to do. And Russell Wilson doesn't fit that. They're not the same style. Sean Payton likes under center, kind of the concepts. Russell Wilson's not good under center. That's not his thing. To drop back into a passing stance from under center is not his thing at all. So Sean Payton, who likes to do those sort of things, he did it with Drew Brees. He had when he was the offensive coordinator with Dallas, when he was the offensive coordinator with the Giants. Before that, they always ran under center plays. He realizes Russell is better when he's not doing that and he's freewheeling it. But that's not his style. So the answer goes to the Broncos. What do you do? That you're on the hook for a lot of money this year, next year, and the year after. This was the most likely year you could have gotten rid of him. You chose not to. You're going to take a big hit. What can you do? Can you just cut him? Do you trade him and hope someone is willing to pick up the tab? I don't know. But do I think it's Russell Wilson's last? This was his last year with Broncos? Yes. Do I think he's garbage? No. I think this doesn't fit him. When he went to Denver, I thought they had to get someone that would fit him, and this doesn't. And that's the only thing I can say at the moment. But I'm not going to go and say Sean Payton came in and he thought he could do whatever he wanted. No. But I will say this. Terry Bradshaw, Jimmy Johnson, independently told Sean, don't take this job. Don't take this job. The Charger job, maybe it's a year away. You take that job. Because if you take that job, you have Justin Herbert, you have a scheme that's going to fit you, instead of going there and trying to throw your weight around on an organization that's not exactly built to win at the moment. Do it with a team that has a quarterback that's going to pay Herbert whatever he wants and roll with that. But just wait a year. He didn't want to wait. You're in this situation. But I'm not going to say he's a thug. That's media bull. Next up, last week, the Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists came out. This is all modern era. I have to specify that. This is modern era. Eric Allen, he was a cornerback for the Eagles. This is his 18th year of eligibility. He's a finalist. Jared Allen, 4th year, played with the Vikings for the majority of his career. 4th year. Willie Anderson, offensive tackle, played with the Bengals. 11 years. Jahari Evans, guard, believes he played for the Giants, if I'm not mistaken. 2nd year. Dwight Freeney, linebacker, he played with the Falcons, played with the Colts. 2nd year. Antonio Gates, played with the Chargers, his 1st year of eligibility. Probably one of the best red zone tight ends we've ever seen. Rodney Harrison, played for the Chargers, played for the Patriots. His 11th year, excuse me. Devin Hester, played all around, mainly Chicago. Near the end, he was in Seattle. His 3rd year. And I have a question on this one. Why is Devin Hester not in yet? That boggles my mind. The greatest punt/kick returner to probably live is not in the Hall of Fame. That boggles my mind. Makes no sense. I don't understand it. He's the best kick punt returner that we've ever had in the NFL, and yet he's not in. That makes no sense. What are we doing here? Torrey Holt was with the Greatest Show on Turf, his 10th year. Andre Johnson, his 3rd year, played with the Texans. played with the Colts, played for the Tennessee Titans, both for the Titans and Colts 1 year, mainly in Houston. Julius Peppers, his first year. Julius played in Green Bay, Chicago, Carolina, and was a force anywhere he went. This is his first year. Fred Taylor played for the Jaguars, his 9th year. Reggie Wayne, his 5th year, played with the Colts. Patrick Willis, 5th year, played with the 49ers. And Darren Woodson played for the Cowboys during the 3-time Super Bowl run, his 16th year. Now, the reason I didn't stop for Willis is because Woodson and Willis need to be put in the same description. How are they not in? For Woodson, he was a big reason the Cowboys won their 3 Super Bowls. He's a big reason. And a lot of Cowboys players feel that way, that we would not have been there without Darren Woodson. For Patrick Willis, he was the best linebacker outside of Ray Lewis in that time frame. How is he not in? What's taking so long? It goes back to this mindset. And again, congratulations to all of them who became finalists. But at some point, we have to scrap the whole, oh, we can only put in 7, 8 people, or we can only put in 10 people, or, oh, we can only put so many people per team. You can put as many as you want. Let's put them all before they're gone. That should be the goal. Let's use NFL history. Let's not pick and choose and do this and do that. I'll give you a couple of examples of what took so long. Terrell Owens. What took him so long? The only thing that took him so long was because when he was off the field, because his numbers say he should be in the Hall of Fame. His numbers say he should be in the Hall of Fame. He was, I think, 3rd in numbers, or 2nd in numbers behind Jerry Rice, who was in the Hall of Fame. What took T.O. so long? What could he have done? Drew Pearson played for the Cowboys in the 1970s. All the players in the decade team in 1970 were in the Hall of Fame. What took Drew Pearson 30 years to get in? And those are so many more of that. But Darren Woodson, 16 years. Eric Allen, 18 years. Why? Why? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't take him this long. If you're going to put him in, put him in. If you're not going to, then don't. But stop wasting everyone's time. Before we move on, I would like to say that this episode of the Webplay Podcast is powered by StreamYard. Thank you, StreamYard, for letting us record the What to Play Podcast, episode number 4. All right. So, this is almost 2 questions, in a way. And the questions go on, what's wrong with the Chiefs / what's wrong with the Eagles? And I've said this a couple times with the Eagles, and I've said this a couple times with the Chiefs, but I want to narrow it in. For the Chiefs, they don't have anything besides Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. They are struggling. They can't protect. The 2 tackles they brought in, Smith and the tackle from Jacksonville last year, Taylor, they can't stop anything. So Mahomes is getting hit constantly. They're taking bad penalties. Wide receivers can't catch. They're kicking more field goals than scoring touchdowns. They punt the ball more. They just struggled against the Cincinnati Bengals team. That can't happen to you at all. And I don't understand what's happening with the Kansas City Chiefs. This shouldn't happen. Defensively, you're staying in games. But when you just struggled against a backup quarterback, when your offense can't score points, you only beat them by 8. You beat them by 8. You won. You won. And you won your division title for the 8th consecutive year. At some point, you have to win by more than these margins. I said the same thing about the Eagles. The Eagles were 10-1, and yet somehow it always felt, geez, what's going on? This was a team that was dominant in the offense. They got all the weapons. They lost the offensive coordinator, which we will get to, but they lost the offensive coordinator, and yet their defense looks worse, but their offense looks like a disaster. And we were saying that, and they were 10-1. And then they've lost. They've gone 1-4 in the last 5 games. I don't understand this. If I'm them. And I can say why. You played San Francisco, you played Dallas, you played Seattle. 3 losses in a row. You go play the Giants, you beat the Giants, barely. But then you go against Arizona and got beat. The game against San Francisco, you got punched in the mouth. The game against Dallas, you got punched in the mouth. They were more physical than you were, and they punched you in the mouth. The Seattle game is unacceptable. You throw 2 interceptions on 2 deep passes, one to Quez Watkins, who's your 4th best receiver. You throw a post, which, yes, he does get tugged. I get that. But it's still an interception. And but they didn't score on that one. Then you let the Seahawks march down the field and score a touchdown. They had to go like, what was it, 92 yards in like a minute 40, and they did it. And they score a big time touchdown. And then you have the ball, you just need a field goal. You maybe need 20 yards for a realistic shot for Jake Elliott. Yet you take a deep shot and it gets intercepted, game over. 3 games. 3 games. That can't happen to you at all, period. Then you barely beat the Giants. You had a lead on the Giants. You barely beat them somehow. Like that, you allowed them to come back in the game. In this game against Arizona, 21-6 heading into the 3rd quarter, and you lost the game 35-31. I don't get it. What is happening? And it goes back to you lost your 2 coordinators. I get it. I know that. It goes back to injuries. Yes, I get it. You know, you got players just not playing well. Darius Slay before the Seattle game decided to get his knee scoped. Why? I don't know. It was bothering him prior to the Cowboy game and prior to the San Francisco game. But why do it then? When you're in the toughest stretch of your schedule and you lost. That's a bye-week thing. That's why would you do that in that situation? In the game against Seattle, he doesn't play. He hasn't played. He probably won't play for the rest of the regular season. But your team, it's not like they're attacking the backup corner. They're attacking your other star corner because he can't play man coverage. They're attacking him. And Giants fans know this. When James Bradbury was with the Giants, they said he can't play man coverage. He's a great zone corner, but he can't play man coverage. And all of a sudden, he's being asked to play man coverage. You made the switch to Matt Patricia, thinking, oh, that's going to solve our issues. When it's you can't solve your issues. Not this year. You can maybe do better technique work, but you can't solve the issues with the schematics that you have. So it comes back to what's wrong with both these teams. For the offense of the Chiefs, they don't have any guy to get open consistently. They drop a lot of passes. The Eagles, Their offense looks like a shell of its former self, of what it looked like last year, but they're not as talented, I feel. They're just not as talented. And I think that's an issue. But on defense for the Eagles, it's just they have all this talent. At some point, you gotta figure, okay, who did we get rid of? Well, if I go back and I say, okay, you got rid of both safeties, both linebackers, you lost a corner, you lost a pass rusher, if I remember correctly. So that's six. I just named six guys who were defensive starters or defensive players in the key rotation. That's problematic. You lose your two coordinators. Like, and just you had 26 plays in the second half against the Cardinals. One of those went to AJ Brown. How does that happen? Your best guy doesn't get the ball. The Jalen Hurts runs on late in the fourth quarter with like I think that was their 10th and 11th run of the game. They just don't run the ball at all. They have this great offensive line. They can't run the ball. Um, they ran a quarterback run play on first down and on second down. They get a big penalty to make it 3rd and 20, and then they take a timeout and then run a wide receiver screen, and then take a field goal. I'd be upset too, because what are we doing? We couldn't even get closer for our kicker to make a field goal, make it an easier field goal. He made it, but we couldn't get him any bit closer at all. It's just I don't know how to explain this Eagles defense. The offense, it's confusing, but the defense is roughly like you still have that great defensive line. You still have that great offensive line. And yet somehow those are the strengths that you had are becoming your weaknesses, becoming your Achilles heel. So those are issues. Moving on to Micah Parsons, who on his podcast, The Edge, he's talked about how he doesn't get a holding call, and he doesn't. 10.5 games that Micah Parsons has not gotten a holding call. The last time he got a holding call, week 6 against the Chargers. At the Chargers, I should say. It was a Monday night game. He got a holding call in like the second quarter. That's the last time he got a holding call. It's not like he's not getting help. To the point that the Cowboys actually had to call, I believe, before the Detroit game, but I only saw it after the Detroit game. They called the NFL office and said, "Hey, Mike is not getting held at all. Like you're not going to throw a flag on any of them. Like he's getting held all the time." I'm not saying call it every time. I'm not saying that because that's football. But none is also a disrespect sign too. Like if you call it too much, okay, yeah, it's a problem, but not at all. I remember this last year, wild card weekend, Tom Brady's final game. Bucks have the ball. It's a third down, and there's a flag thrown. They try to run the ball to the other side. They don't get it. There's a flag thrown. Holding on the offense. Donovan Smith, who was with the Bucks at the time, grabbed Micah Parsons. And he said, "Okay, how much? What do you consider a grab?" Well, normally a grab would be consistent of grabbing his shirt or grabbing his jersey of some sort of way. They're grabbing, but at the time he grabbed Micah like it was a chokehold, like in MMA. It was confusing, and they finally threw it to the point when Micah Parsons got to the side. He's like, "Thank you for just calling it, because I haven't gotten them. I don't get them." It's the same situation. So you can see why Micah Parsons is frustrated. So no holding Micah. in terms of there's no holding penalties against Micah Parsons. But I really wanted to put this down. The media called, and we said this on our last episode, the media called Cowboys sensitive, but the double standard is there. And again, it was prevalent on Get Up yesterday. Harry Douglas, who played in the NFL, he actually played with the Atlanta Falcons. He was a wide receiver with Julio Jones, was really young and he had the long hair, you know. And Roddy White was there at that time. And Harry is talking about how, like, he wouldn't give Dak the MVP, but he says Dak is the best quarterback in the NFC right now, which is his opinion. That's fine. But he goes and says, you can't consider anyone else better because he's beaten them. And but Scott, who is just a waste at this point. It's a waste. You would have more success putting a trash bag up on top of a chair at this point. That's basically the equivalent. But he goes and says Matt Stafford. And Matt Stafford, he says, well, Matt Stafford, when he has Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tyler Higbee, all these guys, and Kyren Williams, he's been great. To which Kimberly Martin, who I don't exactly care for, made a great point. And she said, well, hold it. We make fun of the 49ers with Brock Purdy. It's the same situation. Exactly the same. Well, if he has Debo, he has Kittle, if he has Ayuk, and he has McCaffrey, and he has all these guys, he's good. Of course. He's got these guys. But that's the same criticism. And it is. I'm not gonna double standard that. But yet we criticize him for it. It's the same thing, even though you're gonna say it's not. Same thing we said about the Cowboys last year. They need all these weapons. Well, of course, because even the guys they have are not exactly good. They got Noah Brown at that time, who is doing great things in Houston, though he might not play. He was not going to play in this next game. Excuse me. But like that's the truth. We made the whole thing. It's these double standards in media. I go back a couple years. A couple years ago. They brought on he's a radio host in New York. Before we move on. He's a radio host in New York. Mostly covers the Yankees. And he said, and he goes to First Take. He's sitting there at the table, and they go and tell him, and they ask him the question, who do you think is going to win the championship in New York? They didn't say the Knicks. They said who was going to win in New York. And he gave the name of their hockey team. And you know what Stephen A said? That doesn't count. That's all that needs to be said. Also, ESPN covers hockey, just to let you know. But because Stephen A. Smith said that doesn't count, he basically said hockey's not a sport. I'm talking about the Knicks and the Nets and this and that, the Yankees and all this stuff. Because those are big time things. It's just when they're asked to cover real sports, they don't know what to do. They know how to cover their sport. When they have to cover another sport, they look like a deer in headlights all the time. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna say random things. Excuse me. All right, moving on. As I made my point, the Vikings, T.J. Hawkinson is out for the year towards ACL and MCL injuries. I should say ACL and MCL injuries. We don't fully know if it's torn, but he's out for the year, which is very disappointing. He's very impactful in the middle of the field, in the end zone. It's what he does. He's very good at. And I thought he was just coming along in this system with Kevin O'Connell this year. So not having him out there definitely does definitely does impact the the Vikings offense. And into the recap. So when for week 17, the Cowboys beat the Lions in controversial fashion, 20-19, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. CD Lamb had 227 receiving yards, which was a career high for him. Dak Prescott had 345 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. It's a bad pick. He's trying to do too much. Jared Goff, I don't think he played terrible, but he had 2 interceptions, 2 diving interceptions. Those things can't happen. The run game, they had over 100, I believe 120, 125 in rushing, and it wasn't enough. They need a little more. And we'll get into the whole controversy in a little bit. The Dolphins vs. Ravens. The Ravens smacked the Dolphins 56-19. It was a close game. Actually, the Dolphins did have a lead at one point. Just, it's very bad. They didn't play well enough. And the Ravens are probably the favorites. I'm not breaking any sound barriers, I think, in this. But the Ravens are going to be the favorites to go and win the Super Bowl, be in the Super Bowl in this for the end of the year. That's what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco and Baltimore wins the Super Bowl matchup. But there's also a couple of teams in the NFC. I'm like, anything could happen because it's just been one of those years. Lamar played really well. Again, the Dolphins, I don't think they played bad. I think they're just struggling against good teams. Even when they beat Dallas, they beat them by 2 points. They're not beating people convincingly. They beat them. That's the important thing. But when they go against a team like the Ravens, they're just not even in the same class. Just not. Next up, we talked about the Bengals and Chiefs. Chiefs won 25-17 in a game where I thought Mahomes, even if he gets a whole year together, he needs to find some weapons. The Chiefs haven't done a good job, and their GM Beach has to get people. This can't keep going at all. Cardinals Eagles. Cardinals won 35-31 in a game where, again, Cardinals had 40 minutes of time of possession and the Eagles had 20 minutes. Even though the Eagles were up at 1 point, 21-6, never felt like it was the Eagles' game. And it ended up being right. Dalvin Cook parts ways with the Jets, signs with the Ravens. Wants to go to a Super Bowl team. I get it. Dalvin Cook's not been ideal this year. Out of 72 qualified running backs, he's 72. That's not good at all. Baltimore, maybe it's different. Great offensive line, great quarterback, really good wide receivers with Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers. I want to see what he can do, if there's anything left that he can do. It also just seems like the Ravens keep finding ways with these backup players. They can be stars too, and it works. Excuse me. Next up, Lions, Cowboys. referee controversy. So I don't have to really explain this more than I'm going to. The controversy came out when we saw the video of both Taylor Decker, Panay Sewell go up to the official to try and like to try and deceive the Cowboys, ends up deceiving the official. Dan Skipper, who was supposed to be eligible guy all night, ends up getting deceiving the official too. So multiple things happened, multiple advances happened. I want to see. They said to Brad Allen, "You want." The controversy between the Cowboys and the Lions game. They said, "Okay, Brad Allen and your crew, some of your people might be able to be in the playoff game, but there will be quite a few that won't." I'm like, wait, that's just very confusing. Why not all or not? More likely it would just be all. But they had to word this correctly. I will make note that there was a couple bad calls, and Brad Allen's crew has always had bad calls, especially this year. This is just it was a national television game. The disparaging thing, I think, or not disparaging, but the wrong thing the NFL did was when the officials get their games they're going to do, they get it a month before. But what ends up happening is Brad Allen gets another game in national television on a national stage as he covers the Ravens and Steelers. And I'm trying to figure out why he deserves that. I understand you get it in December or you get it before that, but these things cannot happen to you. So it's a black mark on the NFL, and we're sending the wrong message here. I don't know if there's a way to fix this. I really don't know. What's the way? You make officials full time? You fine official? What do you do? Because the NFL is saying no, it's the right stuff to do. It's not though. The Lions did lose the game because of it, and because of that game, and plus the Cardinals beating the Eagles, we have continued to talk about this game. I will make note also that Lions players are still ranting about this, and as much as they should, um, it's it's over. It is what it is. As bad as it was, you got to move on, and they haven't, and that's a problem. Um, and in a way, it also helps the Cowboys because it actually could get them the second seed if they beat Washington, and the Eagles don't have any. Like they need Cowboys to lose to Washington and then beat the Giants. So there's a lot of factors going on. But the highest the Lions could get is the third seed. And people said, well, it's a lot of money not going to the community. You don't understand. It wasn't about that. It was about that we couldn't win the game because the officials made the wrong call. But that's the issue. And the fact that this was done on a national scale, because it was the only game on, we all saw it. But if this game would have been at 1 o'clock, we would have never saw it. It's just that simple. All right. Moving on to on Monday, I will do my show on NFL World, but we will talk about as the course of that day goes on, multiple coaches are going to be fired. To which a day that it's not a thing, but it really should be called Dark Monday, but it's considered Black Monday, even though it's not. The idea is all these coaches are in their darkest hour because a lot of them are gonna get fired. I think if you go through the divisions, Ron Rivera's probably gonna get fired. The reports I've seen, Eberflus probably will stay with the Bears. Dennis Allen and Arthur Smith are expected to stay. Let's see what happens. I still think one of them is going to go. I think it has to be Arthur Smith. The way he's used Bijan Robinson is criminal. But yeah, I saw 10. I'm like 10. I don't think there'll be even 5. And how many of them are going to be willing to go and throw and throw the tea in the hub and try and figure out what we're going to do and abandon ship at the moment? I don't see if you could. I just don't see it. Do I think coordinators are going to get fired? Yeah, that's going to happen. But I think if you look, are you going to fire what Pierce has done with the Raiders? They've played really well. They might not have won, but they're fighting. I think you have to. I will make note though. Um, there's a lot of good defensive coordinators that could be head coaches by the end of all this, and I'm including Aaron Glenn, Dan Quinn, and Raheem Morris, the DC in LA with the Rams. I think they all could be head coaches. You got all these situations, and you have to really feel like these are jobs, but these affect the families too. Which I understand when all the coaches get fired probably on Monday or Sunday night. Because I have the faith of Ron Rivera is going to get, if he loses this game against Dallas, or even no matter what happens, I think his fate is sealed actually. He might be fired by 10 o'clock that night on Sunday night, which I know ESPN will do this whole thing, this whole charade of, oh, a black coach got fired. We have to say how good he was, even though his record says different. And next week, me and Lucas will do that. But again, it gets nonsense, and it's every year. When Marvin Lewis got fired, it was the same thing. And I'm like, Marvin Lewis deserved to be fired. Hugh Jackson deserved to be fired. You couldn't say anything that would have changed my opinion on that. My mindset is take this as positively or negatively as you want. If you're good at your job, or if you're trying to get a job and you're good at your job, you get that job, or you get to keep that job. But if you're not good at your job, you don't fall upwards in my book. No, goodbye, leave. I'm not doing this. We're gonna go get somebody else to do that job. Now, I'm not gonna do like what David Tepper's been doing, which is 1 year and then out. No, I'm not doing that. It's a process. But I'm not also gonna go and keep you around because you do a terrible job. That doesn't make sense either. So those are some of the coaches. I think Ron Rivera is gonna get fired. I think either Arthur Smith or Dennis Allen's gonna get fired. On top of the other 3 that we've had. So I think maybe at most 6 will get fired. There will always be a shocker, and we will do a video on it. And I'll do a video on it next week when it all happens. Now into the Week 18 preview, the final week of the NFL regular season. Cowboys vs. Commanders. The Cowboys are favored by -13. I have the Cowboys winning 31-10. The Cowboys will try and get their players out if they have a big enough lead. So I have the Cowboys winning 31-10. Next up, Bears, Packers. Packers are favored by 3 in Lambeau. These two teams started off the season. They end the season. I think the Bears have nothing to play for, but the Packers could get their way into the playoffs. Bears win. Bears have played really well. This keeps Eberflus's job. Bears win 28-24. Next up, Texans versus Colts. +1 for the Colts. Game was on Saturday. Colts need this to get in. Texans need this to get in. I got the Texans. The way CJ Stroud has played. The Colts are interesting. Still think they're a year away. That's a great job by Shane Steichen. But I take the Texans. I like what DeMeco Ryan has done. Texans win 28-21. Next up, Buccaneers versus Panthers. Panthers are getting plus 5.5. What am I talking about? Plus 5.5. Buccaneers need this to wrap up the division. If the Panthers win, no matter who wins, Falcons, Saints, gets into the playoffs. I have the Panthers winning just to be fun. Panthers are going to win this. This just seems the way they're going to win. They're going to win 22. They're going to win 23-14. Next up, Falcons versus Saints. Saints -3 in New Orleans. I got the Saints. I don't trust what Arthur Smith does. Bijan Robinson needs 25 yards. I don't even know if he can get 25 yards because he might just not put him in. So I got Saints winning. I also think of the two teams that could win this division of the three, both the Saints and the Bucs will give the Eagles the most trouble. Or give any team the most trouble at the first seed because they are a handful in how they play. But I have Saints winning 21-14. The final game of the 2023-2024 season, Bills versus Dolphins. Dolphins are getting +2.5. They're not favored at home. This goes back to Dolphins aren't beating good teams. Or if they do, they don't beat them by more than 3 points. I have Dolphins winning 28-20. And the Bills, if Pittsburgh wins and Houston wins, if Pittsburgh wins and Houston wins, they won't be in. The Bills could either make the playoffs or miss it entirely if they don't win this game. But that is the picks for Week 18 and all the news of the last 2 weeks. Again, this marks the end of the What I Play podcast, episode number 4. This is all powered by StreamYard. Again, we say thank you, StreamYard, for powering the What I Play podcast. And we'll see you guys next time on the 5th episode of the podcast. Peace.